Hi, good afternoon, and welcome to all of our followers here on YouTube. We're also transmitting via Facebook Live and Instagram Live at our account at Beltran Brito LLP. My name is Stephanie Mata. I'm an associate attorney here at the law offices of Beltran Brito Casimir. To my right is the partner, Mr. Daniel Casimir, and today we're going to be discussing EB-5s as they relate to regional centers. So, what is the famous EB-5? This frequent question we get.
Sure. So the EB-5 is what's very commonly referred to as the investor's visa. It's a way by which an investor in the United States or someone making an investment in the United States is eligible for a green card. So basically, the end result of this EB-5 application is permanent residency for the investor and his or her family, which is defined as spouse and minor children under the age of 21. So there's a few benefits to the EB-5 program. Obviously, for the investor, it's going to be the green card. For the United States, it's investment using funds from abroad to fund a certain project in the United States. And the purpose of that project is to create employment. So that's the purpose of the program. The United States receives funding for previously approved projects, and then the person that helps provide that funding, depending on which route they go with the EB-5, which we'll get into a little bit later, receives a green card.
So one common vehicle, sorry to interrupt you, one common vehicle is what we're going to discuss today, which is the regional center. And the regional center essentially is a project that has already been approved by the U.S. government, right? So tell us a little bit about, in detail, the regional center.
Sure. So basically a regional center, you can think of it as a project that has been approved by the United States government. And the purpose of that project is to create employment in the United States. Each regional center, it's different. Some regional centers might require certain capital to start. Others might require, or the end result might be different. What I'm trying to say, they're all different. Each regional center is going to be different. And you have to think about it as any investment that you would be making. I mean, the most important thing is always, meet with the representatives of the regional center. Maybe try to see what past work they've done or what's been the success of other projects that they've undertaken, if they've undertaken any previously. That's going to give you a very good idea, not just that, but also if they've ever been approved for the EB-5 visa before. That's going to give you a good idea as to whether it's going to be a lucrative investment, and also whether you'll have success with the EB-5 visa itself. So I always tell everybody, make sure go out, do your due diligence, meet with the representatives, and make sure that you're investing your money in a project that you believe will succeed. So that's essentially what the regional center is. It's an investment opportunity, and through investing or by investing in a regional center, you would be eligible for a green card under the EB-5 program. Now, a question that we get a lot is, who qualifies? Do I need to have a certain nationality to qualify for the EB-5 visa? Can my family be included in this application? The answer is yes. First, your family is included in the application. Again, your family is defined as your spouse, the principal investor, the spouse, and then any child under the age of 21. And we'll get into, what happens if the child turns 21 throughout the process. We'll get into that. But for now, just think about it as the investor, the spouse, and then any child under the age of 21.
And to your other point, the question about nationality, in contrast to what's known as sort of the E2 investor visa, this EB-5 visa is eligible for any nationality, right? There's no limitation.
Exactly. So, there's no limitations. For instance, the E2 visa, that the United States must have a treaty with the country that the investor has nationality with. We don't need to have any treaties. The U.S. does not need to have treaties with any foreign government for this type of visa. So, very often the United Kingdom, for instance, the U.S. has a treaty with the United Kingdom, Canada, for the E2 visa, which is also an investor's visa. But that's not necessary for the EB-5. So if your home country does not have a treaty for the visa with the United States, that really doesn't matter in this case because the EB-5 is open to any nationality.
And one other important contrast now that we discuss this, as far as, for example, our UK viewers, essentially. One difference is the E2 is sort of a temporary means, whereas the EB-5 is leading to permanent residency in the United States.
So not to deviate too much into the E2, but you're completely correct. I mean, the E2 visa, that would be what's called a non-immigrant visa. It's a temporary visa that you need to keep extending. You need to extend it while the business is going on. The EB-5, that's a permanent residency that you'll get once the application process is complete. So basically, that's, a better benefit, not only because it gives the principal investor the green card, it gives them the permanent residency, but it also extends the same benefit to your spouse and your minor children under the age of 21.
Okay, Danny, so tell us, we have found the investment, some common investments, hotel projects, real estate projects. We have our investment. What is the role of the lawyer?
Sure. So our goal is basically to work with the investor. We work with the regional center on certain aspects of the application that, we need documents from them. We're going to work together and put together the application package from start to finish. So it's a process. It's a process that'll take a few years, and it's a process that it's divided up into a few different stages. Our goal is to make it as easy as possible for you. So let's start off with stage one. That stage one, that is the most important part of the application for me, because that's where we work both with the regional center and also with the individual investor. So basically what we'll need from the regional center is we need to demonstrate that they've got an active project, it's an active business, and most importantly that it's projected that they will create 10 jobs during the course of the project. That's going to be the most important thing that we need from the regional center. We deal directly with them on that matter. As for what we would need from the investor, it's not just showing that you've made the investment required by the regional center. Again, each regional center is going to require their own minimum investment. It's not just showing that you've made that investment. It's also demonstrating where did the investor obtain those funds. So before we even take on a case, we will review the source of funds. We'll review where these funds came from and make sure that we can go ahead and proceed with this type of application, because that is one of the most important things to demonstrate with this type of application. What are general common sources of funds? We've done everything from inheritances to gifts, shareholders that have sold shares in a business. We worked with a lottery winner one time, so you name it. As long as we can draw the link from where the money that was invested came from and demonstrate that it was not only maintained in a legal form, but also it was obtained from a legal source, then we can go ahead and proceed with this application.
And a question I get frequently is, what is the minimum dollar amount of the investment?
Sure. I mean, that's going to depend on the regional center. Right now, the law states that it is $500,000, but that's all going to depend on the regional center, on the project. So I always recommend speak with the representatives from the regional center. They'll be able to give you a better idea as to, the investment amount and what is needed from the individual investor to proceed with this investment. So that is basically the first part in a nutshell. We go ahead, we submit this application to the U.S. government. Now, what happens if you have a 20-year-old child and, we're submitting this when they're 20 and a half years old? We can go ahead and submit this prior to them turning 21, and they'll be protected. We can go ahead and still include them in the application. That is, all the while, that first stage gets to the U.S. government prior to the 21st birthday. So I'd like to do it in anticipation of the 21st birthday and not necessarily wait till the day before. Let's try to get it there as soon as possible. So that's the first part. That's going to take anywhere from 16 to 26 months to process. I've seen cases in 13 months. It's extremely rare, but I have seen it. 2 years is really the average of what we see, but it could be less. It could be a little bit more. 16 to 26 months is a pretty good indicator of how long it could take. Once that gets approved, we're ready to move on to the second phase of the application process. That second phase of the application process is where you'll actually receive your conditional residence here in the United States. There's two ways to process that. If you're in the United States right now, you can go ahead and just change over that conditional residency without having to leave the United States. You'll just receive it in the mail once the application is processed. If you're outside the United States, you'll just go to the U.S. Embassy in your home country and you'll get issued the conditional residence there. Now, very important, this is a conditional residence that you are receiving. It's a 2-year conditional residence that will allow you to move to the United States with your family. You'll be able to work in the United States. Your children will be able to study in the United States. They may be eligible for certain scholarships depending on the requirements of the scholarship, so it would be good to check with the university. But you will be conditional residents, and that is good for 2 years. Right. So you'll have that privilege here in the United States. 90 days before the expiration of that conditional residence, that's when we need to start the third part of the application process. And that's where we apply to remove the conditions. Basically, this is what's going to get us to the permanent residence in the United States. So this part of the application process, it could take a while. I could see anywhere from 26 to 39 months for the U.S. government to process this third part. It's usually around 2.5 years. But that's a pretty good indicator, 26 to 39 months with 2.5 years as the average. So we'll go ahead, we'll submit the paperwork for that part. And while it's being processed, you'll continue being a conditional resident of the United States. So you'll get that extended every year while the application is processed and until the final permanent residency is approved.
What kind of documents are we showing at this step?
Sure. So with the regional center, again, there's various ways to apply for an EB-5. Today we're focusing in on the regional center. But for the regional center, the most important thing amongst other things that we need to show, the most important items that we'll need to show is that the investment actually occurred. That this project actually took off. The project
actually generated 10 jobs.
Generated 10 jobs, exactly. So that's really what we're interested in seeing in order to show that everything that was said in the first part of the application actually came to fruition. So that's what we would be doing in that third step. Again, it's a step that could take about 26 to 39 months. You would retain your status as a conditional resident during that time. And then once that third part is approved, once those conditions have been removed, we can go ahead, or you'll go ahead and you'll have your permanent residency in the United States. That's a permanent residency that's valid for 10 years. You can renew that every 10 years, or if you're eligible, many times by the time that the conditions have been removed, you might even be eligible for U.S. citizenship already.
The note on that important point is that your time while you're a conditional green card holder also counts towards the time clock for possible naturalization later on.
Exactly. So, even if that conditional residence is extended 2, 3, 4 years, which 4 years probably will not happen, but 2, 3 years, you're fine. That goes ahead, that counts for naturalization purposes.
Perfect. Taking a look at the questions we may have received, it looks like, what are some examples of some investments, some examples that you've had during the course of sort of what we've seen lately?
Yeah, regional centers, we've seen a lot of real estate projects, whether it be hotels, office buildings, we've seen corporate parks, we've seen housing developments. We've seen a good amount of real estate projects that are involved as part of regional centers.
It looks like we don't have any more questions, so I believe this concludes our discussion. Thank you so much for joining us. You can find us on our social media platforms at Beltran Brito LLP, and stay tuned for the next one.